Okay, and welcome back. We're now going to start adding some detail and texture to the rock, but before we do that in this video, I just want to show you very briefly how texturing works in Blender, and we're going to do that actually by texturing the plane that the rock is sat on. So to have a look at this first, we're going to have to open another couple of windows. So I'm going to split the window there and make that the node editor. We'll come back to that later. And I'm going to split this window here, and we're going to make that, if I can find it, the UV image editor. Okay, so at the moment we've got the plane selected, and we just need to go into edit mode with the plane selected. Now I know that I'm going to want to deform this later, so I'm going to subdivide it, and I'm going to make the number of cuts 50. Okay, so that gives me lots of geometry to create a detailed ground plane. So that's the subdivision done. Now we're going to press back into edit mode, make sure it's all selected, and press U. For a simple plane, we can just click on unwrap, and notice how here the plane is perfectly unwrapped to the bound of the image. There's no image there at the moment, we haven't loaded any textures in, but it's unwrapped it as a plane. With more complex, as we'll see in the next video, the unwrapping process is different, but we can see that's fine. So I'm going to get rid of that window now so that we're back here. Okay, so that's unwrapped. Go back into object mode, and I'll put it into render mode. Okay, I've just changed the lighting a little bit from the previous video. So environmental lighting uses a HDR image to light the image, and this one is the sort of lighting that I'll be having in my scenes anyway, so it's a good one to work with. Okay, so I'm going to click on the plane and make sure that the plane is selected, and I'll just rename that ground, and then I'm going to click on the materials tab and click on new. Okay, and immediately we can see we've got things set up here with a basic diffuse, which is a basic colour, so we can see what happens if I change that. We could give the ground just a dark brown colour, but we're going to go a little bit further than that. So I'm going to delete, well no I'm not, I'm going to leave the diffuse there. I'm just going to put something else in between. Now I'm not going to go into this too much. This is a shader that I've made. So basically it's a physically correct shader. It uses Fresnel, which is to do with how light reflects off a surface depending on the angle that you are looking at, and it mixes some glossy in, which we get to change on the outside of this. So I'll come out of that. Every possible thing that you can think of has glossy and diffuse. Okay, nearly everything. There are a few exceptions. So I can take the roughness right down, and we have a bit of reflection there. Okay, it's dark black because we've got nothing going in here, so it defaults to black. If I turn the specular right up, the colour's ignored because it's completely reflective. Okay, so that is completely reflective like a mirror, and we can control with these how this basic material looks, but we're going to go one step further. So I'm going to drop this diffuse into the shader, which is going to give us some brown, but then I'm going to add something else into here. And what I'm going to add instead of that brown colour is an image. So let's go for stones. Stones 1. And let's drop that in. Okay, now at the moment what we've got on there is a 2D image. Scale is a little bit wrong, a little bit too big for what I want. So I'm going to put in a mapping node where I can change the scale. So scale really should say repeat. It's the amount of times it's repeated. So that texture is repeated 3 times that way and 3 times that way. And if it was a 3D object, it'd be 3 times upwards as well. Okay, so that's the first part. I'm just going to minimize these somewhat. Okay, so we now need to turn this into not a 2D texture. So I'm going to duplicate this one, then I can minimize this. So that's our basic colour. That's what's giving us the colour that we can see there on the plane. The rest of them aren't colour textures, they're simply a roughness map, specular map and a normal map. Okay, so in here I'm going to open the roughness map. Is actually the gloss map. Open image, non-color data, and drop that in there. Okay, so that controls how reflective and not certain aspects are. Duplicate that and open the reflectivity map and drop that into specular. Okay, now we've still got a very 2D flat plane, but this next one, duplicate that, is our normal map. Okay, now what this does is gives the appearance of 3D. Yep, I've opened the normal map. That has to go through another node, normal map mode, which will be set to the UV coordinates. So we put the colour into there and that converts it to height data and we drop that in there. Okay, now things look wrong at the moment, and if you remember we changed the scale here, but we've only got that going into the first image. So what we need to do is we need that going into that image, into that image, and into that image. And we've now got a ground plane that looks a lot more 3D. But if you look on it really on its edge, you can see that it isn't. Okay, so we've now got a more realistic looking set of stones. They're quite glossy, looking like there's things we can do to change that. I'm not going to do it in this video, but basically we can put, I'll just show you very quickly, a colour ramp in there, which for photographers is like a levels adjustment, and we can change the contrast of the image that's going in. So we can make it a lot less. Take some of the white out. And you can play with that, and that's where a lot of the fine fine tweaking comes in of your textured materials. Okay, there's one more thing we need to do, and that's with the plane selected, we're going to go to modifiers, add a modifier, and displace. Now, ignore the fact that our plane seems to have jumped at the moment. We're going to apply a new texture, and then we're going to click and choose a texture. We're going to open I've got to remember which folder I'm in. Stones. Okay, so in here we go into stones and we find the displacement map. Okay, now at the moment we can see it's absolutely all over the place. We'll change the repeat to 3 like it is on the other, and then we'll go back to the displacement modifier. We'll change it to UV coordinates. And then we need to take the strength down to something really low. So we'll try 0.1. Still quite high, and as we can see we haven't really got enough detail in there, so I'm going to add a subdivision surface, but I'm going to put that above the displacement and create more divisions. And we're really slowing down now. And then I'm going to take that strength down even more to 0.05. And what's that done is it's given us a proper displacement, even if you go to the edge, that is perfectly mapped to the image. So what we've got there now is a rocky ground for our rock to sit on. And then we could further go in with these colour ramps and control the specularity and gloss. So that gives you an idea of one way in which we could texture the rock. But because we've sculpted the rock and made it a perfect shape, unless we had a photograph that perfectly fit that, it wouldn't work. So instead what we're going to do is do something called procedural texturing to colour the rock in the next video. Okay, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.